Hi Year 11s, this is the next in my short series of revision videos all about getting you ready for paper 1 in AQA GCSE English language. So paper 1 is the creative reading and creative writing paper, as you should know by now. So this video is going to focus on what techniques I need to use to answer each question in the reading section. So that's questions 1, 2, 3 and 4. Remember, those questions are out of 40 marks. They're worth half your marks on this paper and a quarter of your marks for your entire English GCSE, which you need for the rest of your life. Okay, so question 1, first of all, if I was if I was in the exam and I was a student sitting it, then I would have my highlighters at the ready. And the first thing that I would do for question 1 is highlight where it says lines 1 to 9, because I am going to stick precisely to lines 1 to 9 when I answer these questions, because if I don't, I won't get a mark for it. So my first tip for question 1 is use the correct lines. It's lines 1 to 9. That does not include the blurb. Look for the little number on the source. My previous video was about the source. Look for number 1 on the source and click on it. So that's where you start the 1 and you go through to 9, and those are the only lines you're going to use. Okay, the next thing is, it says in the exam paper, list 4 things about this jungle from this part of the source, and I'm going to give you an examiner's tip. Don't list 4, list 5. You're going to do 1 for luck. As an examiner, I have to put a tick by every single true statement that you write down, every single correct statement. It's really easy to make a stupid mistake or to get something very, very slightly wrong. Exam nerves happen. And in this question, trust me, AQA want to give you 4 out of 4. They really don't want you to fail. They want you to pick up some easy marks on this question. It's an easy question. You've got to be really literal. And to help you be really literal as well, try and start each statement with this jungle, so the words there, or it is, so the jungle is. Okay, so that will help you stay really focused. Sometimes it might be something like, write down 4 things about Mr. Fisher from this part of the source. Write down 4 things Rosabelle does in this part of the source. If it's the name of a person, start each statement with Mr. Fisher marks his books. Rosabelle has an egg for breakfast. Okay, so something like that. Use the name and then you know you're answering the right question. So just to recap, question 1, the exam board wants you to get 4 out of 4 on this one, and they're going to bend over backwards to try and make sure you do. Help yourselves. Use the correct lines, write 5 things, put 1 thing down for luck, and start each statement with the topic of the question. So 3 tips there for question 1. Question 2, if you have a look, I'm the student in there and I'm doing a bit of highlighting. Again, look in detail at this extract. On paper 1, they very kindly print it for you, so no excuses to go outside the extract, from lines 16 to 26. So again, I'm going to highlight those even though it's underneath. And then in the question itself, it tells me what they're looking for. How does the writer use language here to describe the Tyrannosaurus Rex? And what I'm going to write, it's really scruffy, isn't it? I'm going to write 3 PEAs. That's me trying to write on my computer with a mouse. Hopefully you can annotate your exam paper a bit neater than that. And then underneath, it gives you some handy tips, but one of them is not so handy in my own opinion. So it says you could include the writer's choice of words and phrases. You could include the language features and techniques. It says you could include sentence forms. And you can see there, I have crossed out sentence forms because it is very rare in my many years of teaching and my many years of examining that I've actually seen someone write something particularly clever or illuminating about a sentence form. So unless there's something absolutely groundbreaking that you can see about sentence forms, I rather think that's a bit of a waste of a bullet point. So just to give you a bit more advice on that one, what I want you to try and do on this one is try to write 2 to 3 really in-depth PEA paragraphs. So you're really digging for meaning, the deeper meanings here. And I'm going to do another video where we look at some good answers that are getting more than half marks. What I want you to do is whichever quotations you pick out to analyse using your point, evidence and analyse, I want you to put them into context. I want you to explain what's going on. Don't just randomly take a quotation out of context. So, for example, it's delicate watchmaker's claws, and then suddenly start writing about someone making watches. That's not at all what the writer's trying to make. You've used the quotation, but you've totally put it in the wrong context. And make sure it's in the context of a dinosaur, because that's what we're writing about here. And then also, to help you with your point as well, try and refer your point and your point evidence analysed back to the question. So remember, we picked out that useful name from the source last time, the author's name. Bradbury uses language to describe the T-Rex here when he writes, drop your quotation in. Or you can change language if you're trying to be clever to a simile, or he uses numerical data to, or fence of teeth is a metaphor, which similar to what we said before. He uses decent adjectives, doesn't he? And there's some powerful verbs. So you could switch out language and put the technique that's being used there instead. Right. Here's a really, really quick one. What you find in the exam booklet now when you sit in this exam is they give you about approximately 2 pages to write on. And when you get to the 3rd page, they label it extra space. And what that is that so it's not threatening for students. Right, you get some students who have got kind of small or medium-sized handwriting, and the 2 proper sides that they give you to write your answer in, that should be more than enough to write a decent answer if you've got small or medium-sized handwriting. They've labelled this extra space as extra space, so they're not scaring people who have small writing. But if you're like me and you've got big, kind of loopy, swirly writing, then you may well need this extra space. And they're just saying it is extra space just in case you need it. They're not expecting you to fill up that page. So hopefully that will reassure you if you do have small writing. And I've just put here for illustration purposes, 2 videos ago in this series, I wrote about don't write outside the box. So here's a good example of the box. And here's the instruction not to write outside it. And hopefully, if you're listening carefully, you will know the reason why we don't write outside the box is it might not scan in, and then it won't get marked. And this amazing vocabulary and spelling that you've been using might not be credited. Okay, so that's a little aside. We are now moving on to question 3. This is quite a cluttered slide. You may want to pause it after I finish talking and take a screen grab, or just read it in your own time. So question 3, again, I'm annotating away as a student. You now need to think about the whole of the source. This text is from the middle of a short story, like it said on the front page. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? And underneath I've just written, okay, it's a structured question. This is a little bit different from what we normally do, like picking out quotations and analysing them. We're going to be doing something a bit different in this question. We're going to be looking at the structure. So there's a couple of ways that you can think about structure. The easiest and quickest way to think about it is thinking about how you use paragraphs in your own writing. And if you know the tip-top rule, then that will help you. So tip-top stands for time, place, topic, and person. And when you learn the tip-top rule, that's about knowing when to start a new paragraph. But it's really, really handy for analysing structure too. So these are the things you can look for in the structure. What's the time doing? How's the place changing, or is it changing? Is the topic changing? So like in our dinosaur one, the topic changes from the beast in the distance to the beast getting up closer, for example. And then the topic goes from trying to shoot the beast and Mr. Eccles trying to run away. So you see what I mean by topic. And then person. So the person could be who's speaking, like who's telling the story, or the person could be what people are there. Person could also make you think about dialogue when people are sleeping. So that's sleeping when they're speaking. I mean, so tip-top paragraphs, time, place, topic, person. That can really, really help you when you're thinking about what do they focus your attention on at the beginning. Is it a person? Do they focus on the time? Do they focus on the place, the setting? Okay, so thinking about at the beginning. As the source develops, how does the focus change? So do they start by focusing on Mr. Eccles and then change the focus onto the dinosaur, for example? Or does it keep switching back between the dinosaur and Mr. Eccles, which actually is what's going on here? No, if you have been working really, really hard and kind of taking things on board and learning really well, then you might want to think more about the structure questions, which just take the whole kind of tip-top paragraphs idea and just develop it in more detail. So who's a speaker? Who's telling the story? Whose perspective? And there's some keywords: first person, third person, omniscient, unreliable, focalization, narrator, narrative, narrative voice. What time is it? Is it a linear chronological narrative, or is it a little bit jumpy? Do we get flashbacks and so on? Is there anything that happens in this extract that might foreshadow to give us some hints as to what's going to happen later? You can speculate a little bit about that, especially if you think the writer's being obvious. Next one should be straightforward. Where am I? So what's the place, what's the location, what's the setting, how do I find out? So does the action all stay in one place, or are they kind of moving about? There's a nice Key Stage 3 paper where it starts off in someone's house in the garage and it moves into the kitchen and then into the living room, and different things happen in those places. So in that one, where I am, the place is really important. And then who is here, what characters have I met? And you can see here I've got all this key vocabulary underneath, which is really handy to use. You don't get loads of marks for using technical terminology, but it can help you express complex ideas more clearly. And if you're using this kind of structural vocabulary, you know you're writing about structure and not accidentally analysing language by mistake. If you accidentally start analysing language, it just won't get marked. You won't get any marks for it. You won't lose marks, but you certainly won't get any extra marks for analysing the language. This is not language analysis. You may want to use one or two quotations, but not really. Okay, so there's your tips. Really, really simply, just remember tip top. Use the bullet points. If you're taking your revision very, very seriously, take this, learn off by heart. Right, we're on to question 4 then. So question 4 is the big mark question. And I've done quite a bit of highlighting on this. So I'm that student in the exam and I want to be focused. So question 4, although it's a big mark question, it's about half of the source, and it's about the second half of the source, and it always is. Okay, but they'll tell you which line to start on, and here it's 31. What I'd be doing is also putting a big box and highlight pen or coloured pen around the insert around lines 31 to the end, so that I remember to stick to those. And then what they're going to do is give you a statement here, and that's what the S in C's stands for. And the statement can be chunked down, and I've picked out the important bits. This part of the story where the men encounter the Tyrannosaurus Rex shows. First part of the statement, Eccles is right to panic. Second part of the statement, the monster is terrifying. Okay, so those are the two parts of the statement that I'm going to be arguing with. Sometimes you can chunk it into 3, normally at least 2 you can chunk the statement into, and you've got 2 different bits of it there. And the question is, to what extent do you agree? Okay, so that's what you're answering. And in your statement, you're going to be looking at this. So your statement might be, I totally agree with the student. Eccles is right to panic because. Or you might say, I disagree. I don't think the monster is terrifying at all. I think he's rather cute and I would like to cuddle him. And if you wrote that, it would be a very bad answer, but it's showing that you're engaging with the statement. Okay, so that's what it means by statement. You're going to look at one or other parts of the statement and say what extent you agree or disagree with that statement. What you're going to do next in the seasoning on it is just a fancy PEA, really, but it really keeps you focused on that question there. You're going to pick out the evidence or the quotation to prove your point. So drop in your quotation. And then you're going to work through your analysis. Your first one's going to be your inference. So again, it's a little bit like putting it into context and saying what the quotation you've chosen, what does it suggest? As I said, we'll go through an answer to this question in more detail in a future video. So first of all, it's kind of that inference, that overall meaning of the quotation. Then you're going to pick out what the key vocabulary is in that quotation, or something like a simile or a metaphor, or even a structural technique that is being used, and really zoom in on it and try and find that deeper meaning. And then finally, you're going to evaluate that statement. So you're going to say how everything that you've written does or doesn't agree with what the student has said. All right. So does what you say support what the student has said, or does it help you to show that you disagree? So in a way, the statement at the beginning where you say whether you agree or disagree with the student, it's kind of almost a little bit like evaluating. So this is almost like an intro, and this is almost like a conclusion if you're writing an essay. And then you kind of really get into the analysis in the middle. So that is the C's mnemonic, the word that we use to really, really help us answer question 4. And it's a 20-mark question. So you probably want at least 3 or 4 really decent C's paragraphs there. Okay, so probably 3 or 4 C's paragraphs where you're going into lots and lots of detail. Now, the one thing that I haven't mentioned and revised is the timings. So as you're going through the paper and thinking about your techniques, don't forget the time that you should be spending on each. 4 marks, 4 marks, 4 minutes. 8 marks for question 2, 8 minutes. Extra page, 8 marks for question 3, 8 minutes. 20 marks for question 4, and that is big old answer, 20 minutes on that one, please. Okay, so that's your exam technique for paper 1, GCSE AQA English language. How to answer the questions, and some really useful techniques to help you revise and know how to annotate up your paper so that you can smoothly just go ahead and start answering it now, knowing that you're doing the right thing on each question. I will see you next time, where we'll talk a little bit more about the creative writing question, question 5. Bye for now.